Joel Embiid has been one of the more controversial figures in the NBA since the second he stepped foot on the NBA floor. But the level of hatred seems to have reached new heights this year, with ESPN leading the charge in these directions. I want to break down in this video why Stephen A. Smith needs to be checked on his topic of conversation regarding Joel Embiid in a comparison to Ben Simmons, which I thought we were well behind us at this point. We obviously have lived through the trenches of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid trying to make it work on the court. The seasons of success that there were before things went south, then obviously one of the more disruptive and kind of craziest breakups that we've seen from an NBA player, forcing his way out, holding out, crying wolf for any issue that could possibly get him out of that contract there. And obviously Ben Simmons still kicking around with the Brooklyn Nets, and Joel Embiid still holding down the fort just fine here in Philadelphia. Now, I know that we are at basically an all-time low for the Joel Embiid stock price at this current point, that there will be more doubters and there's more legitimate concern, I would say, for the remainder of his career than any other point. But it's still pretty disrespectful to throw him in these conversations in the way that Stephen A. Smith did. And for his exact conversation here, Stephen A. says, quote, "Let me say this to Joel Embiid in all seriousness. You're about a tad bit away from being compared to Ben Simmons. You bring up the injuries and all that stuff. I look at the disinterest on his face, the lack of enthusiasm." So to start with the legitimacy of this from Stephen A.'s perspective, it is fair to assess that Joel Embiid has not had the best body language throughout the entirety of his career. I do think that has been a notable issue that has popped up in stretches that you see when he's struggling. You feel him moping a little bit out there. It is fair to assess that is not the case. But what we also see on the other side of that spectrum is when Joel Embiid is having fun, everyone knows it as well. We see the crotch chop. We see him pointing, talking trash, celebrating to the crowd, riling them up. Every little routine that he does run through right there. So it does go both ways here. I know Joel is not the most, mature human being in the world. That has been an area of growth that we've kind of pointed to for years at this point. But what I think is being drastically under-discussed in the conversation is just how these guys could not be more different in terms of quality of talent. One of these players, body is failing on him in the midst of a all-time great career. One of these players has been top 2 in MVP voting in 3 of the past 4 seasons, and with the one season that he hasn't, he was the favorite prior to getting injured. One of these players has played a grand total of 77 games in the past 4 seasons since he has forced out from the Philadelphia 76ers. And to dive into the exact kind of breakdown of this, to give their stats during this stretch, that Joel Embiid through the length of his career, 27.8 points per game, 11.1 rebounds, and 3.6 assists. In those 77 games across the past 4 years that Ben Simmons has played, he's averaging 6.4 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 6.1 assists. But let's check in on directly this season. Neither guy fully living up to what you would hope to be the case. Joel Embiid, 20.3 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, 3.8 assists. Obviously, efficiency is not where it needs to be, but to compare it to Ben Simmons, we are talking 5.3 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6.6 assists, shooting 59.2% from the field. Still directly scared to throw it up with any sort of contact, still struggling from the free throw line, still refuses to attempt three-pointers. We know the story with Ben Simmons here. And it was funny, I was kind of having a back and forth when doing a radio show for Fox Sports The Gambler here in Philadelphia, where it was asked, "I feel a Ben Simmons revenge game coming," was a comment that was made toward me. And my comment back was, what is he going to have, a triple single? Like, that is kind of the Ben Simmons peak at this point. If you were at this point in time, and again, I mentioned this with clearly saying that I think there is more legitimate concern for the future of Joel Embiid than ever before, that I think there is a fair argument made more so this season than ever before in his career of these injuries catching up to him. Can he stay healthy? All those conversations are slightly separate. But what if the conversation is which of these guys will have another season like their peak between Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid? It's Joel Embiid 100 times out of 100, man. Ben Simmons is a shell of himself who does not care to bring that effort or has that desire to be good at basketball. He will go down as an all-time frustrating player to me because the raw talent is off the charts. If this dude had the heart of a player like Tyrese Maxey, he would be the best basketball player of all time. Maybe not quite that, but he certainly would have that Hall of Fame potential. We saw the way he was able to sleepwalk to All-Star games and never really showing areas of improvement in his game, and that directly impacted the growth of Joel Embiid. This kind of worked out in a positive way for the Sixers in the long haul, as Joel added three-point shots to his game, was able to space the floor, became a little bit more versatile. But the reality is they could not be more different as personalities, and that was kind of why that did not work here in Philadelphia in addition to the court. Now, to bring kind of the legitimate concerns with Joel Embiid, obviously this kind of stuff is never going to go away. That he, at this current point, remains out with a sinus fracture. He will be reevaluated in 1 week. We basically have no sort of concrete timeline from the Philadelphia 76ers. We did get a little update regarding Jared McCain, which I did want to pull up here. Pretty vague from the Sixers perspective, but the PR did release a statement saying Jared McCain underwent successful surgery today to repair the lateral meniscus tear in his left knee. He remains out indefinitely, and updates on his recovery will be shared as appropriate. So a little bit of positive news there. I would have liked some more clarity as far as what was the specific type of surgery he got and what is the timeline from there. I think there's a real chance that the Sixers are fully evaluating how the results are in his absence and what the outlook is for bringing him back before making that full decision. But I am curious to see what that is. And to kind of reflect on the standings here, that we can see the Sixers sitting at 8-16, just a game and a half out of that 10 seed, which would be in that play-in mix there, but obviously not where you want to be at this point in the season, and a team that clearly just has to get results. They have their next game against the Hornets again, pretty solid matchup there, as they have 3 wins against Charlotte already this season, and obviously a team that with LaMelo Ball is back on the floor, and it's not a walk in the park to get that victory there. But these are games that if you want to take yourself seriously as a team that has any hope of climbing, you got to take care of business there. So I do see a world where the Sixers are kind of playing that game to see how the chips fall before making a decision there. But to bring it back to Joel Embiid here, this is all built around him. And that is kind of the struggle, that when looking at these standings, yes, they just got to get victories and climb this. But when thinking about what this team can fully look like together or how good they can be, it's all relying around Joel Embiid being the superstar on that team. And we do have to bring into question if that could be the case there. And why I do think Joel deserves more credit is when looking around the rest of the NBA, there are very few stars who can raise the floor of a team in the way that Joel has. And what do I mean by that? Is when you have a guy on your roster like Joel Embiid, you're going to be a playoff team year in and year out. That has been the case since he has been healthy enough to log at least majority of the season here. That he is a guy who keeps that foundation. He is going to give you a chance to win on a night in and night out standpoint. Look around at some of these other stars in the league, and that is just not the case. Jimmy Butler, who we've talked plenty about on this channel, and you could make a case. He's obviously an all-star caliber talent, a guy who has played some of the most impressive stretches of basketball of any player in the league for certain playoff runs. But there's also a reason why the Miami Heat are constantly sitting at the 8th seed or scrapping out of the play-in tournament. It's because he's not capable of bringing it on that night-to-night basis. To pull up the exact stats for the Sixers record with and without Joel Embiid, let's go year by year. That last season, they were 31-8 when Joel Embiid played. They were 16-27 when he didn't. The season before, 43-23 in games that he played, 11-5 without him. Not bad result there. Their best record out of all of these. 21-22, 45-23 with Joel Embiid, 6-8 without him. 2020-2021, 39-12 when Joel Embiid plays, 10-11 when he does not. The season prior, 32-19 when Joel Embiid is on the floor, 11-11 when he is not. The season before, which this was the Jimmy Butler season year, or the Jimmy Butler year, at least the second half of the season, they were 43-21 in games that Joel Embiid played, 8-10 in games that he didn't. The season prior, 41-22 in games that Joel Embiid played, and 11-8 in the games that he did not, this being very early in the process, and Ben Simmons being a part of this equation year. And even his rookie season, while they were just 13-18 in the games that he played, 15-36 in the games that he didn't, so you can see the sort of impact there. So that is kind of what the difference is to me when we have this conversation regarding Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Is there's one player in this conversation that is going to give you a chance to win on an every night basis that can be that foundational point of this franchise. And then there is a guy who once again has played 77 total games over the past 4 seasons with far less legitimate injuries than what Joel is dealing with for the ultimate record here. I know Ben is not quite what he once was, that I do think there is some legitimacy to the back issues, but I've also heard plenty of stories of just the disinterest in this guy wanting to suit up and play basketball games. So I don't have much sympathy for Ben based on how things burned out here. I have even less sympathy for Stephen A. Smith and do think that it is outright disrespectful to some of the people who work as hard as they do to be put in this position to kind of speak out of turn on topics like this. And I do think, I personally find it offensive when a guy like Stephen A. Smith, who was on the pregame show the other day, can't name who Dante Exum is playing for, or another member of around the NBA there. It's very frustrating that the most forward-facing faces of ESPN don't really, dot their I's and cross their T's in the way that should be required for that position there. But I digress from this particular conversation. I am happy that this awoke a little bit of a stick up for Joel Embiid in me. That there was a part of me, as I mentioned, that I do believe this is the down period of the Joel Embiid outlook and about as, deep in there as we've gotten as far as the outlook being negative. And I'm glad that inspired a little wake me up, still got our guys back. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. And I am kind of sick of having the Embiid and Simmons conversation, the parallels. I think that battle has been pretty clearly won by the big fella in Philadelphia, and the right decision was made to ultimately bring back James Harden in return when that deal was done. And for all your thoughts about James Harden, you can have your belief, you can have your non-belief, and obviously didn't leave on the greatest of terms either. You cannot deny that he gave this team a better chance to win than what was the case to Ben Simmons. A little hat tip to Daryl Morey for that on the way out as well. But let me know what you guys think as far as the conversations and really your outlook on Stephen A. Smith at this point in time. Would love to hear you guys sound off and give your thoughts below. So let those comments rip. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys for watching. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button and dropping a like if you have not already. I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.